Hello and welcome to Scared in the Name of Science, episode 6. This is the halfway mark, near enough.
Pretty much, yeah. That's wild.
How are you feeling?
Do you know what? I feel like we've become a lot smoother at these introductions.
Definitely. My heart is certainly thumping less in my chest as we switch the mic on.
Fair. I don't know if I can agree. I'm very curious as to what tales you've got for me today.
Ooh, well, let's get into it. Today's episode will be about the will-o'-the-wisp. Friend or foe? For those who aren't aware, the will-o'-the-wisp refers to a type of bog lights that goes by many names and is found in various folk tales all across the globe. Some common names for the will-o'-the-wisp are as follows: Fool's Fire, Pixie Lights, Jack-o'-lantern, or Jack-o'-lantern for some, Spunky and the Lantern Men, which sounds like a band, because how I said that makes it sound like a band.
It really does.
Now, I believe that the name Jack-o'-lantern should be ringing a few bells. Rox, what do you recall about the Jack-o'-lanterns?
Well, isn't a Jack-o'-lantern the American name for, like, carved out pumpkins and stuff? That's where I've heard Jack-o'-lantern is. That's it. With
the candle in them that lights the way. You have them at the front of a house, yeah, but
to scare off spirits on Halloween so that they don't come into your house. That's my understanding of the reason for pumpkins and corked out root vegetables around that time of year.
That's fair enough, and I think that, I agree. But in my reading I found that they do originate from the will-o'-the-wisp.
Interesting.
So this is just a long way of kind of describing something with many different names, and essentially it just refers to strange lights that appear over moors, marshes, fens, bogs and varying waterways.
And we've got a hell of a lot of those in Wales.
We most certainly do. So there tends to be a commonality between all these different names and stories, and that is that these lights are typically nefariously inviting travellers and wayfarers off the path into certain death in water. In a Reader's Digest, Folklore, Myths and Legends of Britain, there are mentions of jack-o'-lanterns in the fen swamplands, which used to seek out lone travellers and tempt them off the path. The people who lived near the fen swamplands believed that the jack-o'-lanterns could attract you to them by whistling, and that in order to protect yourself if you saw them, you need to lie face down on the path until they've moved away.
That's really interesting. So you have to almost pretend you're a corpse in order for them not to be interested in you?
I mean, that's a certain way of looking at it. In my mind, it tends to go for... I kind of draw up the slightly more juvenile. I'm not in danger. I can't see the scary thing. The scary thing can't see me.
Interesting. Okay, so maybe that's got a link there, and that's where it comes from.
But also, it's hard to be tempted off a path if you can't see what's tempting you off the path. So by averting your gaze and protecting yourself and hoping it goes away eventually.
Just one other question as well. Where's the fen swamplands?
Yes, I did research this. Yes, I looked at it on a map. Yes, I made a note of it. But now you are asking me, it is completely gone from my head. Give me 2 seconds.
2 seconds have passed.
The fens or fenlands are in eastern England, and they're found around Norfolk, Suffolk, Cambridgeshire and Lincolnshire.
Okay, so that's why I've never heard of them, because they're on that side of the country.
When I first saw fens, for some reason I thought Ireland, and I could not be more wrong. So
yeah, I would also see fen and I would think Scotland or Ireland.
Yeah, absolutely. I would not think England, but there we are. So there we go. Thank you for throwing that wrench at me.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
No, it's my bad. I looked it up, I just didn't write it. So my apologies for that one. So, Dee Dee Cheney's A Treasury of British Folklore. She talks a little bit about the Cornish folklore, in which will-o'-the-wisps are called pixie lights. In Cornish folklore, these lights are said to either lead travellers off their path, but can sometimes act as a guide for safe passage.
That's my understanding of will-o'-wisps. So when you said about them luring people off of water, I've always heard of will-o'-wisps guiding people home.
Yeah, have you seen...
No.
Wait,
yes.
Yes, and the will-o'-wisps in that movie are leading to what you follow towards destiny.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting how they're completely different depictions. And I think that's quite concerning Do you follow them or do you not follow them? You know?
I mean, I guess it depends, in my opinion, whether or not you're happy to be transported to the fairyland, which in my case, come on down, I will go. I just have to bring my fiancé and my dog, they've got to come too.
You go off to the fairylands, I don't want to be found face down in a bog somewhere.
You mean you don't want to be a bog person?
I do, but I don't want to be face down and drowned in a bog. Like, I don't want to be 200 years' time, wow, look at this perfectly preserved idiots we've dragged out of the bog.
Hey, we don't call them idiots, they're people who were priestesses and dedicated to their gods.
No, in my case I was an idiot, not in their cases. They might
Okay.
have had some legitimate reasons to be in a bog,
Fair
but I
enough.
most certainly wouldn't have.
But I thought you were actually, like, dissing on people we've discovered in, like,
Oh,
books.
no, there's been some very good reasons. I think there's even been some ritualistic reasons that
Yeah.
they've kind of been there. Yeah, absolutely, and there's some really valid cultural reasons. If I am ever found face down in a bog, it's because I'm an idiot, and no other explanation.
Noted, you have this podcast as proof.
So as I was saying, god damn it. So, as I was saying, in Cornish folklore, they're called Pixie Lights, and sometimes they can guide travellers to safe passage. In her book, she also includes a charm that, when spoken, is said to be used to invoke the lights. Jack the Lantern and Joan the Wad that tickled the maid and made her mad. Light me home, the weather is bad.
Whoa, what?
Yeah.
Right, but who's Joan the Wad?
So, from what I didn't make an awful lot of notes on this one because I think it relates more to the idea of pixies and the little folk and the puka and
Okay.
that sort of thing. Essentially, it's kind of like not an awful lot of mention, but it's more to do with kind of pixie sort of
Okay.
folklore, mythology and cool. Jack the Lantern kind of links more to the lights.
Interesting, okay.
So, again, Dee Dee Cheney, who's... I've got an awful lot of her books, in case you can't tell.
You're a big fan.
I am. She expands on this further in her treasury of folklore, seas, rivers, sirens, sulkies, and ghost ships. In this, she talks about how in Swedish folklore, the lights are said to be the souls of those who have died unbaptized. In some Bengali folklore, they're said to be the souls of dead fishermen who lost their lives at work. In the Scottish Highlands, the ghost lights are said to be spunkies who appear more human-like and in the form of a child, and they would use torches to lead travellers astray. What I think is really interesting about this is if you shelf everything you know about the will-o'-the-wisps, if you saw one, do you think you would be likely to follow a light in the dark? Let's say you're travelling, you're on a path, you're not entirely sure where the path's leading anywhere. In the distance, a series of lights appear flickering, and not just appear flickering, but appear to be lighting a path for you to take personally. Do you think that you, in that situation, not knowing anything previously about will-o'-the-wisps, would you take that path?
Right. So I, as you know, am a believer. But
Absolutely.
I also, since I was like 4 years old, had like a big thing with fairies.
Okay.
So when I was little, I used to have a fairy write to me called Belle, who was the Bluebell fairy. She would write me little letters and leave me little presents and things like that. Yes, okay, it was probably my mother, but you know what? I thoroughly believed it.
Fair
and I
enough.
would like check the Bluebells every single day before and after school to see if she'd written back. It was like a big thing for me. And I personally, I am thoroughly here for the idea that fae and fairies exist. I'd have no problem believing that they are just something that choose not to reveal themselves to us except in very special circumstances. That being said, I probably would follow the lights. I'm not gonna lie, because I genuinely do think that if you harbour no ill will to the fae, they'll have no ill will towards you. I would never leave a saucer of milk out for the fae. Like, I would always say thank you for them. If I felt they protected me in a good situation, like I was in the middle of a forest and it was a dangerous path and it was getting dark and I was making my way back down, do you know what? I'm going to say, do you know what? Hey, fae, if you want to protect me, I'm happy for you to do that. That'd be really nice of you. I'm there for it. Like, I would.
I think that's fine. I think that's a completely... So, belief in the fae aside, your beliefs are your own. Now, I personally don't. But I do agree that if I was somewhere and I saw some lights, I would be more inclined to go towards the lights. Yeah. And in that way, doesn't that sort of remind you of an anglerfish in the deep, dark ocean? A little fish sees a light goes towards it, dead.
So, yes, absolutely it does. And now that you've said that, I hate it. But at the same time, yeah, I get what you're saying. I still probably would follow the light. I'm not gonna lie.
And so would I. And that's the thing. There is something that is very safe about the light. As a child, you're in the dark, you're frightened, you plug in a nightlight. And then all of a sudden, everything's not so scary because that scary noise that you heard, probably the pipes.
Yeah.
Mysterious figure in the corner of a room, it's just your coat on a chair. And I think that most people would follow lights should they appear, because if you're lost and you're disorientated, the light is seen as the safer option. You can see where you are, and I think that's a very normal instinct to have.
I think it would definitely depend for most people on the type of light. If it's like some kind of weird blue, ethereal, floating thing, then probably absolutely not. You wouldn't follow that because that seems weird. But if it looks like it's like the glint of a house light in the distance, you probably would. Like, it depends really, I think.
No, I think that's a really interesting perspective. I think personally, if I was in pure darkness, I would go towards any light just to be able to reorient myself and see what's going on around me. Even if the light does look spooky, I think, that's definitely... I think we are drawn to the light. And that's not even in the "you're dead, go to the light" sort of way. Just it's like I think instinctually that is something that we are kind of drawn towards. So, in my research, I found an account of a relatively recent will-o'-the-wisp sighting on a website called woodlarking.co.uk. I'm not going to read the entire account. I did email them and ask for permission, and they said that I could discuss it. I asked for a little bit of further information kind of about where it was specifically, but completely validly they didn't really want to disclose any further information, which I get.
Fair enough.
So in this account, the person or persons described that in their encounter that the woods had fallen silent, that their torch had died despite having brand new batteries, and then all of a sudden there was an appearance of dim lights over the horizon, and more lights appeared closer to them and would kind of move left to right, swaying. They described the light that it kind of drew you in a way that couldn't be explained. It's really rare to find quite recent accounts. And when I say recent account, I believe it was April of this year or last year.
Oh, wow.
So I thought it was really, really fascinating. What are your thoughts on that?
Aliens.
Okay.
No, that to me, the fact that technology was also disrupted at the same thing, the technology disruption doesn't tend to go with fey creatures and things like that. That tends to be more of a ghost or an alien phenomenon from what I've watched, researched, obsessed about for years. So it doesn't track with me that technology would cut out. I would also suggest that in that circumstance, there's a couple of details that make me think that is not a friendly encounter, whatever it is. Firstly, if it was friendly, why would the woods go silent? If it's fey creatures, the animals would be friends, so there'd be no reason for the forest to go silent. Second of all, why would they deprive them of more light if it was a friendly kind of thing, if they didn't want to lead them astray? And second of all, this idea of that they drew you in, that seems weird as well. Then depriving you of personal choice and freedom. So those couple of things, it seems malicious to me. Okay.
Well, it was a really thorough and detailed account, and we will definitely be sharing the links to it so you can go and read and, have your own opinions. I thought it was a really...
So you believe them?
I thought it was a fascinating read. Well, I believe that they experienced something. They must have seen something. For the most part, I think that people don't tend to just flat out lie when it comes to things. I'm sure some people do, absolutely, but as a person, I choose to think the best of people, and I think at worst, people are more likely to exaggerate their story. I know I certainly have in the past. You do to be a good storyteller, but I think that there always does tend to be a level of truth somewhere, and I don't think that seeing lights is inherently supernatural, and as I'm going to go into later, there are some really, really good reasons as to why you could see lights.
Okay.
But I did think it was interesting that it was the woodlands, considering that previous will-o'-the-wisps were sighted in very boggy, waterlogged areas, and there is a reason that I'm going to go into later as to why I find that quite interesting. Sure. It might have been a very boggy, waterlogged woodlands. I don't know. But yeah, I just thought it was a really fascinating account and something definitely worth mentioning.
Yeah, I'm just really fascinated by the fact that it was in the last, 2 years. Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll definitely put the link to their website. Definitely go and check it out. So moving on to Welsh folklore. In Welsh folklore, and I really love that you were talking about the Fae, will-o'-the-wisp can be called fairy fire or fairy lights, and it is said to be caused by the, I'm really, really sorry for my pronunciation, Elladan, which I know is going to be pronounced wrong, spelt E-double-L-I-double-L-D-A-N. So that is said to be a species of puka or elf. They're said to be mischievous beings that did what a lot of the will-o'-the-wisp legends suggest they do, and try and lead people to their death by deviating them from their path. So in British Goblins, Welsh Folklore, Fairy Mythology, Legends and Traditions by Wirt Sykes.
What a name.
I know. He makes an excellent point. Now, to briefly pay back Rox's little English lit test from a couple of episodes ago, I will read a quote from Shakespeare. I'll lead you around through a bog, through brush, through brake, through briar. Sometimes a horse I'll be, sometimes a hound, a hog, a headless boar, sometimes a fire, and neigh and bark and grunt and roar and burn like horse, hound, hog, bear, fire at every turn. Do you remember where this is from?
So the fact that you've brought this up when you're just talking about fairies, I'm going to guess A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Yeah, absolutely. It's Puck from Midsummer Night's Dream.
Heck yeah.
So, just to circle back, a puka is a shape-shifting trickster spirit who can take animal or humanoid forms. I'm not saying that Puck from Midsummer Night's Dream is based on the mythical puka, but there's certainly interesting parallels between the two. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I can see some links. Puka, Puck, puka. Puck turns people into animals. Puka turn... Yeah, I can see links.
Well, I thought it was interesting about, leading them around, getting them disorientated, sometimes in the form of a fire.
Yeah, definitely.
I thought that was, I thought when Wirt Sykes brought that up in his book, I thought it was such a fantastic point, but it was definitely worth a mention, even if it doesn't necessarily prove anything. I just think it's a really cool kind of literature link, and I know that you being kind of into that sort of thing would find that.
Yeah, I think that is a really interesting thing. I like it. Bring in that cultural context.
Yeah. In my research, I have admittedly had a bit of difficulty finding recent accounts for interactions with will-o'-the-wisp aside from the one from woodlarking. So, although there are an awful lot of different beliefs surrounding will-o'-the-wisps and lots of fascinating stories around them, I think that the simplest explanation for these can be found in science. To get a little bit kind of more into my preferred realm of knowing things and not just hoping, we need to delve into the chemistry and the biology. Can I get a whoop whoop? I adore the enthusiasm. So I'm going to be keeping this quite simple because, to be honest, I really don't fancy digging out all of my textbooks, balancing reaction equations and relearning everything about photochemistry.
Yeah, you'd lose me real fast on that.
Yeah, and I've done it once. Please don't make me do it again. So, essentially, there are a couple of ways that we can kind of categorise naturally occurring lights other than, the sun. So, firstly, I think we should be considering bioluminescence and chemiluminescence. So this can be found in fireflies, plankton, algae, bacteria, certain types of fungi, and these organisms can produce or absorb a funky chemical compound called luciferin. Luciferin being linked to Lucifer, being linked to light bearer. Light is emitted as a result of a compound undergoing a enzyme catalyzed reaction. The enzyme is called luciferinase because we like to keep things nice and simple in the worlds of chemistry. Excited states are not very stable, so you consider this excited state an intermediate state. So basically, the really excited state molecule kind of needs to go to a more stable state, and light is emitted until the molecule has decayed back into its stable ground state.
So it's getting rid of all of its pent-up energy by expelling it in the form of light.
Yeah, so to put it into, like, more of a fun kind of metaphor, it's kind of like feeding a bunch of sugar to a toddler and then waiting for them to run it all off.
Okay.
They've got loads more energy than they kind of can stand to have, so it gets decayed off of them in the form of light.
So with the child analogy, they do it in the form of kinetic energy, whereas these chemicals do it in the form of light.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to say that, you know, if it's happening in organisms, it's bioluminescence, even if it is chemical reactions. So bioluminescence is observable in the UK. I believe that the most common form of it is in kind of types of plankton along certain beaches, and we will be putting up some links of some very beautifully lit beaches.
In Wales.
In Wales. You could also consider phosphorescence as a possibility, in which certain materials, chemicals are exposed to a light and they absorb it and they re-emit that energy over a period of time. An example of this is kind of like the cool glow-in-the-dark stickers you get in your room. You like stick them to the ceiling and they'll absorb kind of energy, and then in the evening it will glow because it releases that back out. But to be honest, I don't really think that that's a likely explanation for the phenomena, because in my mind it's just too weak to be matching the strength of the light that accounts have described. I just thought it'd be kind of worth a mention.
Sure.
And now I think we're getting into what the big ticket item is. Can I get a drum roll, please? I love that, thank you. So, I think, and an awful lot of people online also think, that the most likely explanation for will-o'-the-wisp is chemicals produced as a result of decomposition. To preface, this is best summed up on Wiki. Now, I know, but I did look at the citation, so please don't come for me on this. It's just a really good summary, and I will give it to Wikipedia. They do good summaries of things.
Sure. We've talked about it before, how we tend to use Wikipedia as like a jumping off point, so
yeah.
I guess we'll allow...
Thank you. So, in some waterlogged environments, such as bogs, fens, swamps, and marshes, anaerobic decay will occur. Anaerobic meaning decay without access to oxygen.
Okay.
The products of this are methane and carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is not flammable, but methane is extremely flammable, so much so that it can be used as biofuels in certain circumstances.
Cow farts.
Yeah. When exposed to sources of ignition, let's say static energy, lightning, electrical discharge, friction, methane will ignite and go up in a big flame.
Did you know that that is why people think spontaneous combustion is a thing?
Yes, and we will be getting a little bit more into that again.
Awesome. I love spontaneous combustion.
Now, because it is a form of spontaneous combustion. Now, I personally love a good story about spontaneous human combustion.
Yes.
But I think that's been linked to ethanol as well. But also I don't think it's true at all. I don't think we've had any genuine cases of it.
There are thousands.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I've always been under the impression it is a big old myth, other than like ancient accounts of it.
No.
It's not a proper thing.
It is a proper thing, we're just not 100% sure why it occurs.
Okay.
That's fine. I'll do a whole episode
Yeah,
on that.
do you know what? I would love to hear that, because there are, you know, there's reasons for it. It does sound amusing. Not for the person, but the idea that you could just go up in flames.
I will totally do an episode on that in season 2.
Sounds good. In some waterlogged environments, methane is not the only gas produced. Phosphines and diphosphines can also be produced. Now, what's interesting with these is that both of which can be spontaneously ignited by being oxidized in contact with air, which can then have a knock-on effect, which causes methane ignition. From what I've looked at, the auto-ignition temperature of phosphine is 38 degrees Celsius, but diphosphine has a lower ignition temperature. But to be completely transparent, I've had a bit of difficulty trying to pinpoint the exact temperature that diphosphine will auto-ignite. But what is to say is both ignition points temperatures are naturally achievable. So if these are being produced in waterlogged environments with a large volume of methane and temperatures are right, and they are being exposed to the air, then you've got an ignition source and you've got a fuel, which will be creating your big kind of puffs of flame. Now, there's some excellent experiments on YouTube where I'm sure at least some of you will have done this in school, where you bubble up methane through washing up liquid, you hold it in the palm of your hand and it sets on fire and it goes up. I did it in A-level chemistry. Don't do it at home. Just don't. Have a look at the YouTube video.
What if you have a chemist in the house? Because I've never done that.
No.
Oh.
No.
Fine.
So, in addition to all that, so whilst, you've got phosphine as a potential ignition source, it is also potentially, as mentioned, as kind of looked into earlier, linked with chemiluminescence, but I won't go too much into it other than it's similar to what happens with the luciferin in organisms. It is possible that a weak light would be emitted during the molecules decaying from excited state into their kind of ground states. Still alive? Any thoughts of what I was saying?
Yeah, so to try and sort of summarise then, so our options really is chemicals decomposing. No?
When you say chemicals, I don't want people to get the idea that I'm talking big, drums of stuff just lying around.
I mean, naturally produced chemicals.
Typically in animals.
Okay.
Yes.
Because that's my second point.
Bioluminescence.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, theory 1 is animal light up.
Plankton, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That kind of stuff.
Which we know as bioluminescence in animals.
And fireflies are in the UK.
Oh, are they? Mm-hmm. Really? Mm-hmm. Where?
Places where we're not heavily doused in pesticides.
Oh my god, I need to go find... I've never ever heard of fireflies in the UK.
Yeah,
I think something I would love to see.
I think they are more typically found in Cornwall, but no, they are... I think there's only one main species kind of native to it. But
I didn't even know that. That's wild. Okay, cool. So bioluminescence is one option. The second one, realistically, is naturally occurring chemicals puffing into the air and then setting on fire.
Only in cases of anaerobic decay in wetlands and bogs.
Yes. And causing spontaneous combustion.
Yes.
Another one that I don't know if you've considered, ball lightning.
What now?
Ball lightning. Because I am terrified of aliens, but I'm also fascinated by them, one of the reasons that people think aliens could be a thing is because people get it confused with ball lightning. And ball lightning is a phenomenon where, rather than lightning coming in like the zigzag from the earth to the sky, or whichever way around it is, instead it travels horizontally in the form of like a round ball shape. And that's another theory behind will-o-wisps and what that could be. But ball lightning in itself, as far as I'm aware, isn't a super strongly proven phenomenon. So I just wondered if you come across that in your research.
I hadn't actually, but it's interesting to hear about.
Which one do you think it is more likely to be?
I think out of any of them, auto-ignition of phosphine and diphosphines igniting methane, that makes the most sense to me. Having said that, I do think it is super weird that it is not a more observed phenomenon in that instance if there is a naturally occurring explanation for why it could happen. Now, this could be because humans spend an enormous amount of time and resources draining bogs and fens and swamplands, but we do still have them. And further linking to that point, to show I'm not just entirely biased in my own personal opinion, they don't explain prolonged, sustained lightings of pathways, which is what the stories would suggest. Kind of methane would not be like a permanent fixture of light. It would be quite quick. Now, I'm sure there are much smarter chemists out there who might be listening to this and thinking, no, you're wrong. That is perfectly possible for methane to do that. And if that's the case, by all means, come and let me know. Let's correct this and get the absolutely truth to the situation there, 100%. I'm just, from my understanding, I don't want to say it definitely is this, because even though I think that is the most likely explanation, it doesn't match perfectly to the accounts. And in addition to that, the idea that it is kind of along certain paths, it might be kind of leading people to areas of decay more intensely because that's just what's already there, and that might be where the people being led off the path comes in. But the idea of it kind of forming in a path formation seems a little bit far-fetched. And again, this isn't something that we have an awful lot of observable accounts on. So yeah, those are, you know, my kind of thoughts on the situation. Is it most likely autoignition of phosphine and diphosphine igniting methane? Yeah, I think that is the best explanation we have of it. But I would be not doing my job if I didn't mention how it does not perfectly fit. But also, again, as mentioned previously, people exaggerate. So they might have seen a light, but then they might have added there was numerous lights leading me off path.
Yeah.
And there is a figment of truth to that story, but they might not be giving the full accurate account.
Another question that I have regarding this as well, though, is with 38 degrees being the, like, catch fire temperature for one of the chemicals, phosphine, I think it is. Is it the case then that there are more... I know you said you really struggled to find more modern cases, but is it more likely then that it would be a summertime effect rather than like a wintertime? Yeah,
most likely, absolutely. And like I said, diphosphine has a lower ignition temperature, but I can't pinpoint what exactly.
Sure.
But, you know, I think it would definitely be a more summertime effect, especially if you think about it in terms of decomposition. Decomposition is faster when it's warmer.
True, yes.
So if it's too cold and waterlogged ground freezes, nothing's happening.
Gas ain't going nowhere. My other question as well then is, do you think that there's a possibility that... Because obviously you mentioned that a lot of these come from like Cornwall and stuff like that.
I wouldn't say a lot of them. I just mentioned Cornish folklore.
Oh, fair enough. So I was just wondering whether there was any kind of connection between Cornwall and Wales and the fact there are huge mining industries, whether gases could get trapped underneath in the old mines and then find their ways out to escape, because a lot of old mines are turned into woodlands. Just look outside my back door. So I do wonder if there's a possibility of the reason why these swampy, boggy, woodlandy areas have these kind of situations is because it is the gases escaping from old abandoned mines.
Well, I think it would depend on the mine, the kind of gas that you would get escape from it. I haven't considered it. I can't confirm or deny in either way. Unfortunately, I just don't know enough about the chemical release of the mines to explain that reaction, but potentially.
Fair enough.
You know?
So our options are fairies, aliens, gases, bioluminescence in animals.
Yeah, I will say, though, that I think a lot of people would be able to recognise a firefly.
True.
In the sense that they're not going to be clustering in huge flickering flames. They're just...
That is true.
So, and again, with the other observable bioluminescence in the UK really just being plankton, that's the ocean. So just giving examples of naturally occurring light, really.
Yeah. I really want to see some of this stuff now.
Yeah, I mean, well, we could definitely plan a road trip to the beach and try and find some plankton.
Absolutely, I meant will-o-wisps, but yeah.
I don't think we're going to find will-o-wisps very easily.
Darn.
Sorry, my mind went, yes, we can definitely see plankton at some point or another.
I was talking about the supernatural phenomenon.
Of course. We can...
All I ever asked for.
Yeah, so thank you very much for listening to the episode. If you've got anything that you would like to add... if you've got any other explanations as to why you think will-o'-wisps are appearing, if you have any more details about why sometimes they're portrayed as friendly and why sometimes they're portrayed as leading you to your death, and how you can differentiate between what flavour will-o'-wisp if you've got it, then let us know.
And don't forget to tag us in any videos or topics that you think might be interesting of us.
Thank you guys. Hope you enjoyed the episode.
Yeah, thanks for listening.